Hello. Welcome everyone. I'm Wanda. I am the Vice President of Internal Communications. So essentially what I do for the Accounting Club is whenever I need to speak to Eduardo or anyone at college, I'm the person that bridges that gap between the school and the club. So first of all, I want to say thank you for joining us for the Government and Nonprofit Accounting Career Panel. The purpose of today's event is to share insights for individuals who have experience in various positions related to the accounting profession. Students and faculty, we thank you for being here. Thank you so much. Most of all, huge thank you to our panelists for volunteering their time to join us. Without them, this event simply would not take place. So again, thank each and one of you, even if it's just for extra credit, thank you. And now we're tremendously excited to make the most of this event. And so my co-host will now introduce each of our panelists.
Hi, thank you, Glenda. My name is Maddie. I'm the Secretary and Historian of the Accounting Club. You see we have two panelists that are joining us virtually, and one that fortunately was able to be here in person. And we have Amber Amon from the Finance Director of United Way. We have Greg Lamb, the Senior Auditor of the City of Bellevue. And then we have Nathan Kennedy, the Finance Director of the Snohomish County. So Glenn and I will be starting off with a few questions, and then we'll open up to the audience. So, how did all of you decide to work within the government or the nonprofit sector? Amber?
Yeah, I can go first. So, I'm actually, most of my experience is from the for-profit sector. I was in the technology industry doing a lot of the back-end finance project accounting for contractors who contracted out to Microsoft or Nike or some major corporations that needed software development or design. And then I switched careers because I am a very large activist, and when I saw that the United Way of Snohomish County had an opening for a finance director, it just paired so close to like my personal goals for being in the community and investing in ways that we can make everything better for everybody. So I didn't have a ton of nonprofit experience, but that has not hindered me really much at all. And while I am learning the slight differences in everything, I think in general accounting is, if you have a good foundation, you can understand and pivot quite well. So I've been there for almost a year. In August will be a year, and I started in August and September. They're like, you're being audited. So I had to very quickly learn all of the nuances that came with nonprofit accounting. So that was super fun, and I'm glad it's over. So I'll pass it then to
Greg.
Greg.
Yeah.
My turn now?
Yep.
Just a little hard of hearing with the microphone there, but yeah, I mean, coming out of college, I looked, was recruited by the Washington State Department of Revenue. I always had an interest getting into law enforcement. I was thinking police or, some sort of federal police or something like that. But law enforcement is also with the Department of Revenue for tax laws. So that was a good opportunity to start, get some good experience. Met some great people, built a great network at the Department of Revenue. And that translated into getting a position with the City of Bellevue. Even 15 years later, there's still people I speak with that I started with the Washington State Department of Revenue. We all got great experience, and they're at all sorts of CPA firms in the area and other state agencies, cities or counties. So it's a great way to serve for public service. So that was kind of my initial thinking, and at the time the job market was a bit tough with the housing market downfall. So got into that, and the Department of Revenue had enhancements. So I benefited from that and got some great experience.
Nathan?
My history is probably a little more different than others. I had started out I had went to Ohio State University, my undergraduate work, and I was one of the many students that had to work through school. And so one of my first jobs that I had was working on campus in the mailroom. And it became a natural extension to, if you worked for the university, to work for the university after you graduated. I graduated with an accounting degree. And so I worked for Ohio State for 4 years as a staff accountant, and then applied for a job to become a consultant doing cost allocation plans for local government, and that's what got me started in county and city government. And got recruited from one of my clients many moons ago, and stayed in county government, and eventually landed a job here in the Pacific Northwest as finance director for Snohomish County. So it's I have a kind of a varied career path, but it's mostly focused in government work, and being an accountant and a CPA, it makes sense for me to be a finance director, city or county.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing. What personal traits, values, and interests are necessary or helpful to succeed in advancing your professions? Number, you want to start?
Say that one more time.
Okay, let me just give you the 411. What certain characteristics, personality traits would help you to get into your profession? What helped you get in the door?
I would say on average, as Eduardo kind of pointed out, accounting has a very quiet demeanor. Most accountants are not loud and noisy by nature. We're very serious. We're very we take everything, because we're ethically bound to accuracy. We're very serious, and if you can be as charismatic as you can possibly be in the interviews and show your personality the most, that carries you quite a long way. Because anymore, what I've learned in the workforce, transparency and work-life balance matters when they're trying to get to know their employees. So don't be as reserved as you might be by nature, and try to really showcase your personality. I am an introvert by nature. This is actually super uncomfortable for me, but I always, in the comfort of my people, I am funny, and I know that I can be clever, and so you try to turn that on as best you can, and it really does help a little bit in that push to show your personality. I think someone who's detail-oriented and analytical is going to definitely thrive in this position, just because when it comes down to the base of the foundation of accounting, it's all, it has to, debits have to equal credits. Everything has to be equal, everything has to be traced and accountable, and your audits have to be passed. So, accuracy and detail is actually of utmost importance.
Greg?
Yeah, I'd say one thing a mentor told me a long time ago was communication is key for all sorts of roles. And I found that to be especially important in auditing with whoever I'm working with. Communication is always key. You want to be upfront. Just because I thought something, I want to ask that and communicate it in writing or via phone. But also being inquisitive is kind of in an auditor's nature to ask questions. Not the nicest phrase, but I'm good at playing dumb, my wife says. So I do ask a lot of questions, and with those questions I follow up with, how do you document that, right? And those are keys working through. So that's a couple of my insights there.
Thank you. Nathan?
I agree with Greg. Communication is key. If you can't communicate what you're doing, whether it's internal controls on a process, accounting process, whether it's financial statements, managerial financial statements, or even outwardly facing financial statements, or being able to communicate with state auditors, communication is critical and probably not as taught as much in the curriculum. At least in the curriculum that I remember when I was going through school. Communication is important. And it doesn't matter if you have the knowledge or the understanding of the right ideas. If you can't communicate it, it's useless. And in terms of what other, I would also say having that ability to balance the analytical preciseness, the analytical nature of an accountant with the ability to humanize that accounting side with everybody else. In order, those accountants that are able to balance those two sides are those that are many times the most successful, because again, it's communication, being able to understand those that are not accountants, and being able to communicate with them. And not just be able to write written and oral, but actually understand what their needs, what they're getting at, explain your situation. It's so critical in being an accountant, because too many times accountants like to talk to one another and they all understand one another, but that doesn't help the rest of the organization. You take what's going on in the financial world, kind of useless.
Thank you, Nathan. That's some very great advice for everyone here. Amber, you said that when you switched over for a nonprofit, you felt that you were closer to the community. Is that what gives, like, for your job, did that give you, like, the most personal satisfaction within your job?
To combine like my personal life with my job.
To get closer to the community?
Yeah, I felt like in finance you don't often see any kind of philanthropic work. If you're out there doing, protests, or if you're out there doing anything to really put your energy towards systemic change, finance isn't the job usually that gets focused on. So finding a finance job in an organization that really wants to do as much as they can for systemic change based off of, all of the preponderance of issues that we as a society face right now. I think that it's really made me feel more fulfilled in my role in finance, where I wasn't as fulfilled before in a finance role. I think finance, I love my job, but I think I love it even more now, yes.
Greg and Nathan, what is it about your profession that gives you the most satisfaction working in it? Greg?
With my role as an auditor, not a lot of people know city tax codes and that sort of thing. So communication is key, but being able to work with people to get them to better understand what they're doing and to simplify it and help them. And I even will give my, sometimes we have, I do backup for phone calls just into the tax office if we have some people out, an email. Just being able to give my direct line if somebody has a question. Small business in Bellevue, they're doing the work, they're doing the construction, they're the HR department, they're accounting department, they're everywhere, right? And it's just 2 or 3 people. But being able to shorten the time that they're able to work on, this particular tax return or something, it's very fulfilling for me to be able to help people and show how simple it is. And also to have that direct contact. They know they have that resource out there if needed. So.
Thank you. Nathan?
I would say what motivates me and satisfies me professionally is working in local government, whether it's city or county government. The services that your family, your friends, people in the audience here, the services you use on a daily basis is many times, one way or another, affiliated with either city or county government. And you don't get a chance to serve your community more comprehensively than those roles. You drive on a county or city street, if you're breaking into your house, you're going to have a city police, or county sheriff's department person coming in to help you out. Local government's fire, EMS, courts, human services, planning development services, everything. And being in the financial accounting role in government allows you to participate in a very, very comprehensive way in providing all of those services, unlike any other job. And I get a big charge out of being able to say, yeah, I know about this project. Yeah, we financed that project. I issued the bonds on that project. Or I worked on doing the accounting on that project. Knowing that you keep your family and your friends safe by making sure that deputies and police officers have paychecks. What other job would you have that could allow you to do that?
Yes, thank you for your responses. How does accounting differ for nonprofits versus for-profit?
For me personally, I feel like the biggest thing that I noticed was the way that we recognize donor pledges and donations, because in a for-profit world, if you're selling a product or you're selling a service or you're on a project, you have a contract. The contract is laid out by, X amount of dollars is the project total versus X amount of hours. The project has a begin date, has an end date. You have this tangible piece of paper that says, here's what you can book on the books. This goes into receivables when the AR goes out. When the cash comes in, this is what's recognized as revenue. With pledges, there is no contract with the donor. The donor can pledge whatever they want. They can pledge $10,000 for the year. You have to book that $10,000 into revenue and put it into the receivables, assuming that you're going to get that $10,000, but that person may never fulfill that pledge. So you have a very large write-off, bad debt write-off each year. Well, you have an allowance, I should say, that you have to guesstimate with the auditors on what you think the actual pledges you'll receive is based off of. So that for me was really hard, because when you have to do a cash flow analysis in any capacity and you have to try and guess what's coming in, you have to assume that the people are going to actually still commit to those pledges. And that doesn't always happen, especially in the workforce when there are workforce campaigns. That comes out of their paycheck. If they change jobs and they don't notify us, we never receive those budget, we never receive that cash flow. So that was a huge thing for me to understand, just because it wasn't as tangible and I couldn't do what I had been doing for the last 10 years in my roles before. And it's been a challenge, and it's I think a common challenge in my role. And I talked to the board of directors, they say that that's actually something that they've had a hard time with as well. And you need a cash analysis to make major business decisions as if you move forward, especially if you're having something that requires a lot of cash out. And it's been fun to try and work with people. Luckily in nonprofit, I do feel like there are way more resources for when you're struggling with something like this versus the for-profit world. You have to rely kind of on your team, and with the nonprofit world, you rely on a network of people. So it is actually much more helpful. They all want you to succeed, so it's definitely a tighter network. So that's my main takeaway.
Thank you. Greg?
I don't have much experience with nonprofits. I mean, I've helped some with business licensing. I don't think I've had an audit of a nonprofit, so I don't have much feedback for that question.
No problem. Nathan?
What was the question? I didn't hear Mike come out on me. What was the question specifically?
The question was, how does accounting differ for nonprofits versus for-profit entities?
Okay, well, there is some fundamental differences. I think your curriculum probably goes over they have some basic fund accounting opposed to straightforward accounting, and government accounting is also leans itself more towards the nonprofit, which is it is a different accounting. And again, your clients. I mean, ultimately, I think too, who you're serving, ultimately, who you're taking care of, working with. That's also a big difference. And it's a motivating factor why you come into work every day. It's different when you go into work to help someone else make money, opposed to taking care of everybody else. Those are two totally different motivating factors.
Yeah. So broadly speaking, how do you ensure compliance with those donations and those cash inflows at the local, state, and federal levels?
So So with any organization or any company that you work for in accounting, you really are bound to creating internal controls, and those internal controls have to be audited. So within those internal controls that we have for revenue recognition and GAAP, we adhere strongly to GAAP with matching principles and revenue recognition. So that has to tie very closely to our internal controls. So still learning, but there is a specific part of a revenue recognition principle that ties very closely to donor retention, the way that we retain their paperwork, the way that we are not allowed to disclose certain information, the way that we have to keep those files for a certain amount of years. So it's very specific so that there isn't any fraud.
Nathan, what do you do to ensure compliance with the federal financial regulations?
So, several things. I mean, we do employ fund accounting like any other local government does. So we have a series of self-balancing accounts, unlike private industry, which wants it all in one. So we have a series of funds. We have a series of internal controls within each of those funds to make sure that compliance is maintained, not just in terms of grant compliance, but also state and federal law compliance, and local code compliance. And compliance is a huge component of government and nonprofit accounting as opposed to the private sector. In the private sector, they still have to follow GAAP accounting. But here it's not just a matter of did you follow the accounting rules correctly, but did you comply with the award? Did you comply with the grants that you were given? Did you comply with the donors' requirements? And yes, there's a large army of people that tries to make sure that in fact happens. The finance department here in Snohomish County is just one of many teams of people that make sure that happens.
Greg?
I don't really have, again, I don't have a lot of nonprofit experience, but I will say that the City of Bellevue Tax Office, we are struggling with the question how to ensure compliance with our tax code. We've tried all sorts of things. Obviously, the pandemic that we just went through limited some of that and brought up some new ideas. But we used to do a new business outreach presentation every other month for new businesses, and we did that in conjunction with Washington State Department of Revenue. We experimented with a Twitter account. We haven't done a TikTok or anything yet, but that's on our idea board. But yeah, we're still trying to figure out how to communicate and level the playing field in Bellevue here.
Thank you. What changes do you think are coming for nonprofit/government professions over the next few years? So what certain things do you think are going to change? Just what you are experiencing right now.
I am not sure I can answer that simply because I'm still so new to it. I've done 10 years for profit, 2 years nonprofit. So I can only imagine I think COVID changed a lot of what we do and the ways that we thought about business, just because when you have something like the pandemic happening and upsetting the normal order of how things have always been, it's when you find out how broken it is. So I can't really attest to any specific thing, but I'm assuming one of those things would probably be stricter compliance, especially with the advances in AI that everyone has seen happening. If that's not terrifying.
Yeah, that's a good answer, Greg.
Yeah, not too much experience with nonprofits, but I'd say generally in the industry, a lot of remote based work and applications, that sort of thing is real prevalent the last few years. And one thing one of my mentors told me a long time ago is, "You used to change because it always happens." And it's true. All sorts of new things always come up. So.
Thank you, Ethan.
My experience with nonprofits ended in the 90s, so it's been a while. And when it comes to government accounting, GASB, Government Accounting Standards Board, comes out with new pronouncements with an S every year, along with state and federal changes there's always changes at the state and federal level, law that affects accounting areas. So, no, it's always changing, as Greg said.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your responses. Now that we have a basis of what you guys do and your profession, we're going to open it up to students, people in the audience. So, is there any questions?
Hello everyone, my name is Robert Chase, I'm the president of the club here. I just wanted to get a sense of what you guys do on a day-to-day basis. So maybe you could tell us what a typical day looks like for you guys.
I can start. So I wake up and I have 4 kids, so I send them, well, one has moved out, I send 3 of them to school, and then I work luckily 10 minutes down the road from where I live, so I don't have to do a giant commute or anything, because that was, driving to Seattle was horrible. Everybody knows this. But that's where the jobs were for a long time, so I was really fortunate to get something near my house. I would say if it's a Monday, I'm checking the bank, making sure that everything looks kosher, nothing looks crazy. If it's a pay week, I make sure by Wednesday we have our payroll done. Our team is actually the United Way of Snohomish County only consists of 7 people.
Wow.
We used to be 30-something people, and during the pandemic, our entire organization really crumbled. So we were doing a lot of work to get back out into the community, and my day-to-day really does entail a lot of cleanup and a lot of my for-profit knowledge, and especially in the technological sector of the workforce, being at the technology, when you're in that industry, they're at the forefront of everything. So they teach you, it's very helpful to learn the tricks and the tips with Excel, the tricks and the tips with systems and integrating things that make your job much easier. And that has helped me do the cleanup that we needed to do with all the things that happened in the pandemic. And there was just a lot of people that had to leave or were laid off, and a lot of the systems just kind of fell off. So, and that's not any one person's fault. It was literally just a result of mismanagement during COVID. Like, no one was prepared for it. So we've done a good job of getting back on our feet, but I would say in general, it's me and one other accountant, and we're regularly doing donations in a cyclical manner. So like Wednesdays and Fridays, we're taking those in, we're logging those, we're doing payroll by Wednesday every other week, we're doing all of the cash analysis that really needed to happen a long time ago to make sure that we can still sustain ourselves while also getting out there still into the community and growing. We are implementing Dolly Parton's Imagination Library, and that has been quite the task. So my day-to-day is very busy, and it changes a lot, but the one thing that's consistent that I actually really enjoy is taking my kids to school. Then.
Greg, what about you?
Yeah, so oddly enough, I wake up every morning also. And then actually, majority of my work is mostly remote now. We did, I was in office every day prior to the pandemic, and then change happened again, and it was remote. And so I had to learn all that, on the fly as I'm meeting with my managers, with auditors, auditing and all that. I had to learn all these tools that we had as I'm doing the work. And a few years later, I've gotten the hang of a lot of the tools, but a lot of my work recently has been with data, like some sort of data analytics. And what I do is I use our own internal data, our tax reporting data from our taxpayers, and I compare that to how they report to the state. We request some data from the state, and I have all sorts of data tables in Excel and Power BI that helps me find audit leads or inconsistent reporting. We just had an endorsement, or what do you call it? We just hired about 4 people, which is a big hiring for City of Bellevue Tax. We had 8 people up until mid-pandemic, and then we were creating so much work with the data work we were doing. We needed some help, so we're just getting those people on board. So Usually, starting off the day, I've been checking emails, updating data tables. We use Power BI for all our metrics, and I like to review that daily to see where we're at and help that direct my work. But we also have quarterly and annual due dates that I have to come back and help a little bit answering phones and emails because we get hundreds and hundreds of calls and emails. But as far as auditing, like meeting with taxpayers to audit, I've now to the point where I'm telling our auditors who we should be auditing and reviewing their reporting, the inconsistencies and such. So that's the majority. So I'm providing these audits to our auditors, and there's a back and forth with questioning I have for me and prepping for their audit. But then generally a few meetings and check-ins each day. So that's kind of a rough description of my day-to-day.
Thank you. Nathan, what does your day-to-day look like?
It can vary greatly. As the finance department director, I have financial operations, budget, purchasing, and insurance report to me. So I have multiple divisions there that have varying needs and varying problems that need to be troubleshooted and worked through internally as well as externally with the other departments in the county government. So oddly enough, yes, I also wake up in the morning, sometimes 3 o'clock in the morning in a panic. Things that needed to get done that didn't. My day typically starts around 7:30, ends around 6:30 at night, 5:30, 6:30 at night, sometimes later. A lot of what I do is working with other financial professionals that are in the finance department, guiding them, instructing them, directing them, troubleshooting, mediating disputes between divisions or even departments. And I spend a lot of time doing that all day long. Mediating issues with state auditors, mediating issues between labor and management. One I just had to deal with here just recently was we recently voted on our main union. Our main union just got done and ratified their contract. And so did our county council voted on and approved it. And it included paying retroactive payroll. So the payroll that they earned between January and May, and that increase that they got, retroactive payroll. How do you get that done in a very, very short period of time when you have a limited number of staff, a limited number of resources to do that? Because they want it, the union wants the paycheck as soon as they can. Of course, everybody wants to get paid as soon as they can, while still maintaining compliance with Department of Retirement Services. Make sure retirement's calculated correctly. Make sure taxes are filled appropriately. Make sure that it's accounted for and displayed on financial statements and also reported on grants appropriately. It takes a large team of people to coordinate and figure that out. And my job is to do that, coordinate them all and figure that out, working with the HR department, working with the unions, trying to get them to realize and get realistic with their expectations. So, do I do actual journal entries? No, I haven't done a journal entry in a long time. But do I help coordinate those that do? You still have to understand the accounting environment and understand what you're learning right now in your classes. I still use that same knowledge and that same expertise and that same education clear up till today. And pairing it with people skills and communication skills and to help run a county.
Can I add one thing?
Yeah, of course.
Just want to say, being an auditor in the tax department, I know director's time is very valuable. And, I'm sure many meetings a day Nathan has and a lot of endorsements, advice. It's very valuable. So I just wanted to endorse that and let that be known.
We all really greatly appreciate your time here, and everyone in the audience really appreciates your knowledge. It's wonderful that you came out here to to really give us all your knowledge and insight about your professions. Does anyone else have any questions?
Hey there, I'm Daryl. I'm the treasurer for the county club, and I'm just wondering, I mean, all of you are working in similar but different titles, right? Can you give some comparison figures for a similar position in the private sector compared to all of you are nonprofit or government sectors, right? Of course, don't tell your salaries, those are confidential, but can you just give a comparison figure between your sector and the nonprofit sector compensation and the private sector compensation for a similar job that you're having right now?
I think it largely depends on if you're a man or a woman. And that's real. So finance and my positions have always worked very closely with HR. I've worked very closely with payroll. The technology sector is extremely highly compensated. When you are in a director role, the equivalent is usually a CFO in a for-profit company. If you're a man, you can make upwards of $300,000 depending on the company that you work for. If you're a woman and you negotiate your salary really well, don't be afraid to do that. You can also make something similar, but they usually come in between $150,000 and $200,000. I have seen that a lot of women do not negotiate their salaries when they are offered the position and just take it as is. Men, 95% of the time, negotiate their salaries or their bonuses or their vacation. My biggest message to all the females out there is please negotiate your salaries and make sure that you're being compensated for what you're worth. Not that every company comes in low, because I think a lot of companies do compensate appropriately, but I do think it's common for men to get higher based off that negotiation. So that's just been my experience. I am paid far less in the nonprofit world because nonprofit in general is just paid less. So hopefully that answers your question.
Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, I work a lot with CPA firms. So usually, an analyst with a CPA firm, there's usually I don't get to the partner level, but I work a lot with corporate tax departments. So all the big name companies in the area, even middle road companies. A lot of them have tax departments, and most education for that is at the federal level of an income tax, and then there's a little small part of that they teach you at Washington State, tax, and then it's very rare that city tax is known, but pretty much every city in Puget Sound has some sort of licensing or tax that they administer. I would say we just hired a couple senior analysts, and I think the pay range started mid-50s, low 60s, and it tops out probably upper 80s. But obviously, if that's not an analyst position. The senior accounting only requires an AA. An analyst is a 4-year degree, and those are 10% higher than that. And then you can top out as a senior, in the 105, 110, something like that. But the negotiations, that's very important also. I will say I am in the 5% in that I do not negotiate. But I was very happy with the offer that I received back when I started here. But one thing I would, small piece of advice is take some sort of, low-level negotiation class. One of the most powerful things I learned or training was in power negotiations. And it wasn't that hard. One of the keys was silence is your friend. So if they say, hey, Ray, we want to pay you $60,000, and you go, and you just embrace that silence. They say, well, I want 65. Okay, but go in with a plan and be willing to listen. But silence is not an enemy in those situations.
Thanks for that advice. Nathan, what about you?
So the question, what is the equivalent position that we have, and then what is the advice to help people get hired and how they get what is it, the different pay ranges and so forth, and how to get there? Is that the question?
Yeah. What would be a similar job title in the private sector that you're
Chief
currently in?
Financial Officer.
Yeah,
would be mine.
and what would be the average compensation comparison?
So the average compensation for a entity, medium-sized entity like Snohomish County, we have a budget of roughly $1.3 billion, annual budget of $1.3 billion. So other entities in the Pacific Northwest, the finance director positions are making somewhere between 180 and 220, 180,000 and 220,000 a year, plus benefits. Compared to the private sector, you are going to be paid less. The sector CFOs of a similar size entity probably making $500,000 or more, plus stock options. You don't make as much. But where do you get to work in a place where you get to constructively make a difference in your community and is not motivated by making sure that the top people make the most money out of their stock options? County government, city government, places like that. You're paid to some degree in your opportunity to make a difference in the community.
Thank you. I don't know about everyone else, but those 6-digit salaries sound pretty nice. Does anyone else have any questions that they'd like to ask?
Oh yeah, so I'm Kevin and I'm the vice president of the coffee club. And my question is, what steps do you guys take to get, where are you guys now?
Much like I was saying earlier, I think as I am introverted by nature, I didn't advocate for myself at times that I should have. And so my accounting career took a long time to really make me feel it was a long time before I felt comfortable to actually advocate for myself and say, I should be compensated more. I should be having a different title for the work that I'm doing. And so I feel like my trajectory was slow at first, but then once I felt comfortable, I was very vocal and very assertive about the things that I felt like I deserved and I wanted because they weren't outlandish. So, and I came from, I'm born and raised in Detroit. So the cost of living in Michigan is much less than the cost of living in Seattle. And I thought when I was offered something quite low for Seattle that it was awesome because I just didn't know any better and I just kept asking for a lot less than I normally, another person of equivalent experience was getting. So after about 5 or 6 years in my just accounting assistant accounting position, I really started demanding my space. I was very, very forward and direct with my my leaders and my management saying, you know, stating my case, this is what I feel like I deserve, this is my experience. I feel like, you know, is there something that I need to do? Like really advocating for yourself and also being reasonable and pragmatic about those requests really does get you far with the correct type of management. If I didn't feel like I was being heard, if I didn't feel like I was being taken seriously, I left the organization and I tried to get another job. Because it takes 3 times, in my opinion, for me to ask for something very clearly, very honestly, very candidly, and if I'm not being met with anything but words, I leave. So I think that's also something that everyone should be doing in corporate America in general, is advocating for yourself. There's a ton of people being overworked right now and a ton of issues with labor compliance, with like children working and stuff. So I mean, it's really important that the next generation of workers is really advocating for what they feel is ethically sound.
Great. I know your work. Greg, what about you?
Can you repeat the question? I didn't hear.
Yeah, of course.
Sorry.
What step did you take to get, where are you now?
I woke up this morning.
Great start.
But no, I would say early, and I still think so now, but very driven with my work, asking questions, meeting the right people, communicative of where I'm at and where I'd like to go, and persistence in communicating that to those that can make that happen is key. But I will say, all of my work experiences in government, and my network, there's a lot of private sector folks that I've worked with through the years or friends, and there's a lot more flexibility, it seems, on a private sector than a government sector. Like, you might be able to negotiate just a small increase, if you get a job offer from the government, but there's boundaries and budgets and pay ranges that are historical and are to keep right in line there. So that's kind of a little advice there. But when I was hired at the city of Bellevue, I was not an auditor. But I was asked if I wanted to pursue that, and it always sounded like an interesting career choice to me. And they saw that I had the skills to become a good auditor and that asking questions. And I just persisted and kept asking questions and communicated my goals and went through a couple of managers to get a promotion to a senior level, and that's kind of where my goal was. Still figuring out what my next goal is, but I've been a senior for a few years, and I think 2016 is when I got it. But my work is changing too. I'm getting into the data work now. I'm not auditing now. I'm telling people who they should audit. So not necessarily a pay increase, but a job responsibility increase, which is valuable for me.
Nathan.
That's a good question. What steps did I take? Like I said, my career goes all over the map. I graduated. When I got out of college and I graduated, I worked for a service company, a mutual fund service company. So an accounting firm that basically just did accounting work on mutual funds and money market funds for banks. Then I spent a year in the Peace Corps as a high school teacher doing math and accounting, teaching math and accounting. I came back to Ohio State University to work as a staff accountant. And then doing consulting work and working in county government in the budget division, and then eventually finally got my chance of being a finance director of a small city, and then moving back to the county government to take a senior role, the CEO position at the county government. And then I came out here as a CFO. So I jumped around. I think the two main things, to answer your question more succinctly, the two things that I felt that was helpful in my career is one, not be afraid to apply for positions and not be afraid to better yourself. If you don't ever bother to fill out a job application and submit a resume, you're never going to get hired. I know that sounds really kind of stupid and simplistic, but it truly is. And I've seen too many people, they're afraid to interview. They're afraid to change. They're afraid to take that next step. And it was a big step going from the Midwest in Ohio to the Pacific Northwest. Take my whole family, pack them up, and we'll head out here and set up shop. That's a big risk. I don't have family here. I didn't have friends when I came out here. I had to make new friends. So taking those risks are rewarded. People who take risks are rewarded. First thing. Second thing is, and last thing I'll mention is, those that are willing to put in the extra hours, and those that are willing to take on the other roles and the other jobs, that build up their resume, make themselves more valuable to the organization they're working in, which gives them more negotiating power. And if they can't negotiate there, they can take their resume and negotiate it someplace else. And I did that.
Great. Who else has questions for this team? Oh.
So my question is, was it like a learning gap between the college and accounting and the world?
A learning gap?
Yeah.
I would say college throws a lot at you in terms of accounting. It's a general, and then when you go out into the world, you get more specified with your accounting. And of course, utilizing the tools is super important. So like when I was in college, I interned at a nonprofit that used Great Plains, but I've never used Great Plains in my career at all. I used QuickBooks or Intact. There's a ton of other big accounting software. So if anything, kind of like what Nathan was saying, taking classes on how to use those accounting systems actually when you go to apply, they'll ask you what systems you've used. And the hardest part, I think, of exiting college and going into the workforce is that you need experience. But how are you supposed to get experience if they aren't giving you the opportunity to get experience? So you have to make sure that you have a good foundation. I think like those tools of really putting into play how that looks inside an accounting system is super important, because that was hard for me. I'd only had Great Plains knowledge, so when they threw QuickBooks at me, I was like kind of confused about where to begin, and then you're gonna have to get your bearings, but then if you change jobs and you go to a large system like Intact, it's again jarring. You have to really understand accounting to make sure that you're using the systems the right way. But that takes time, and it's through trial and error. You're gonna make mistakes. It's all based off of the industry you're in. It's based off of the type of accountant you are. Like I don't know much about tax accounting because I'm not a tax accountant, but I know a lot about accounting and bookkeeping and controller responsibilities, because that's just been what I've done like ever. So that's my input.
Greg?
I wasn't able to hear the question that well there.
My question was there a learning gap between after college to working in accounting?
Good question. I think what Amber touched on there was the application knowledge. When I went through college, I don't think I had any application training, for like Excel or OneNote, SharePoint. I use Power BI a lot now, but that sort of training was not part of my college experience at all. So if you can get experience with that, that'll really help you jump on board. Just being able to know how to use a program within their processes for that job.
Ethan?
So, yes, I'm kind of parroting the other two panelists here. Your job in accounting is obviously, there's no way a university can't teach you every single accounting software application that's out there. No university can teach you every situation that you're going to run into in the accounting field. What they can teach you, and what we do look for as employers, is do you understand the theory and understand the concepts that is taught at the university level? Whether it's a community college or a 4-year degree program or a master's program. Do you truly understand that theory, and can you apply it? Because if you can do that, we can teach you the software application. We can teach you the database we're running. We can teach you some of the internal controls. But the theory we expect you to have from the university and bring that together. And if you don't have that, because you didn't bother to pay attention in class, that would be a problem for you. But do you understand the underlying theory? Do you understand the underlying theory? We can teach everything else.
Great, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions?
Hi there. Can you share some best practices that you've used or to effectively manage financial risks and maintain internal controls within your organization throughout your time and experience?
Can you say that first part into the steps?
Can you share some best practices, some of your best practices that you effectively used and implemented to manage financial risks within your organization?
That's an awesome question. It usually takes more than one person. I feel like it's a team of people usually. Especially helpful if you have someone who is an eye for accounting, whether that's an accountant or someone who understands moving 3 steps ahead. So with finance, at least for me, we want to always make sure that whatever's happening 3 steps from now, we're not going to be reactive, we're going to be proactive. So you kind of assess with experience, that adds to it as well. The times where you knew what to look for and just getting ahead of it. I was trained by an auditor. I had an auditor for a manager for a very long time. It was extremely helpful because she got me the practice of really making sure that I was looking at everything in its entirety, because things will slip by you. You're looking at numbers all day, and it is hard sometimes if you don't have another person to rely on. It will go by you. So reviewing old internal controls, just doing a full assessment of what you would do with anything. Like if you're creating a budget, you want to make sure that you're doing metrics-based stuff. So like, if last year you overspent in one area, you're going to make sure that you're ready to not overspend in the next year. So it's all based off of history, experience, and a collection of minds, really understanding what the risks could be specific to the industry or specific to your company or organization.
Greg, were you able to hear the question all right?
Yeah, I think so. One thing I'll say is, I don't know if this answers the question, but in auditing, getting the proper documentation that backs up, your findings in the audit and referencing that. Excel workbook can get very messy for an auditor, and to be able to track those documents and to show it in a preliminary to the taxpayer is again falls back to communication, right? It's many forms. Also, for city tax, one thing that we're very mindful of in Bellevue is consistent application of our rules and laws. We don't want to, really enforce this for one taxpayer, but go light on another one. We want to create a level playing field so all our taxpayers are operating at the same level for city tax. Just two of my points.
Nathan?
So what best practices do we employ and so forth? Oddly enough, some of your curriculum that you should be covering in your accounting and finance classes at the local university level actually covers some of this. So one of the things we do to make sure that we have sufficient financial flexibility and cash resources in a period of time is we do a pro forma. We require all our different funds, all the individual funds, self-balancing set of accounts to do basically a 5-year budget or a 5-year pro forma statement. And we maintain and we watch and make sure that we have sufficient fund balances in each of those funds, sufficient liquidity, so that we can effectively manage and operate like we're supposed to in that business environment. We also watch and maintain liquidity ratios and overall. So there's lots of different things like that. And some of these things are covered, actually, it should be covered in your curriculum. I know it was covered in mine, so I would imagine it's covered in yours. May not have paid attention that day in class, but if you did, it was there. And we do a lot of those same best practices, a lot of the same functions that you cover in your class. We do apply them here in the real world. And we use those same, there's a lot of rules from like government finance officers associations that you should always have two months worth of operating cash in your fund. You should always maintain that balance. You do. That's one of our rules. We have a whole slew of policies like that to just maintain and make sure that we're liquid, that we have sufficient cash flow, and that we're planning out our future expenses versus our anticipated revenues, and so we can operate.
Can I add one more thing?
Of course.
Have all of you taken a business ethics course yet? Yes, some of them, Mr. Lee.
Mixed nods here.
Okay, so that is also a very significant piece. I think business ethics. There are a lot of you'll see ethics violations. It doesn't occur frequently, but when you see them, I feel like it is the obligation of someone in accounting and finance. It's your job to really point out what you're seeing and be the person who is advocating for everyone else that's working for the organization. If you see fraud or if you see, I have a good example. I worked for a company that somehow the VP had access to the payroll system, and he would take time off, but then he would go back in and give himself the time back. So on the books, you have to accrue that's a liability. You have to accrue the vacation expense because when you leave, you're paid out that vacation expense. It was essentially stealing money. And it was my job to thankfully we had a payroll system that had a very clear audit trail that showed that he was the one logging in and doing this. So I had to present it to the CEO and eventually he was let go. But it is your job. It's a scary task when you find a business ethics violation, but it is part of that financial risk that you're talking about.
Got the next question lined up here.
Hi, yeah, I was wondering how you think AI will affect the jobs available in accounting.
But AI terrifies me, just so you guys know. Like, I have a 20-year-old and a 17-year-old and a 12 and 11-year-old. And my 20-year-old and 17-year-old really like to play around with Snapchat AI. And they really like to play around with ChatGPT, I think it's called, right? And they're like, Mom, look. And I was like, stop feeding the AI, please. But they don't stop feeding the AI because it's human nature to be curious, I think. So do I feel like my job is at risk? I think it's happened cyclically throughout my career where a new technology comes and scares you as an accountant, like when the TurboTax came out and you could do your own taxes, all the tax accountants were like, oh my gosh, I'm not gonna have a job because now people can just do it themselves, but at the end of the day, humans are prone to error anyways, so you still almost always need an accountant. There's an accountant at the IRS probably auditing that if you did it incorrectly. There are computers that help us do our jobs, and I do feel like there's a human component to business decisions that likely won't take my position away. If anything, I think accounting is, and this is my probably terrible analysis, but I feel like my job is pretty safe, accounting's pretty safe, for now. We've all seen the movies, I don't know why they play around with it. But I feel like there's a couple of other sectors, like obviously we've seen the writer's strike and the way that the writing English art sector is being threatened. I think actually that one is probably at risk right now.
Greg, what are your thoughts on AI?
Not too knowledgeable about it, but it does scare me also. There's even with our City of Bellevue Tax Department, we're exploring how to use it. Is it a tool that we can use, like, and how to use it? But it's very forefront of that, and I've been included with that committee. We haven't even had our first meeting. I don't even know that we have a agenda or topics to talk about. But at least the committee's formed with looking into it. But hopefully it's a tool. I don't know enough about it to be knowledgeable if it'll take my job. It probably could. I mean, a big part of my job is compiling data and analyzing it, and maybe they're quicker and have better eyes than me. So maybe I'll answer next year. I'll have a better answer next year.
Nathan, what about you?
I can see in our finance department, I can see some positions being eliminated by AI over time. But largely, no. And for this reason, artificial intelligence, from what I had seen and read and reading up on the news like everyone else, its primary emphasis is artificial intelligence. It mimics intelligence. It's not intelligence. It takes information from the web, compiles it, synthesizes it, condenses it, processes it, and puts it out. Not all information is out there on the web, one. Two, in our finance department, I don't pay people just to do data entry and data input. I pay people to think and use their brains, like the other panel said, use ethic judgments and pay attention to what they're doing, what's going on, and how their actions affect the overall organization. I pay you to think, I don't pay you to just data entry. Right? If the goal is just to do data entry, if the goal is just to process and create a financial statement based upon the input that comes in, Yeah, AI could probably do a big chunk of that work. But there's a lot of work that requires judgment, requires interaction with other human beings, requires all your various communication skills that you've learned, how to convince, how to educate, how to talk to. I get to see how AI can replace that human function. I understand what AI is, I understand what it does, I understand what it can do, I've seen it. Again, I'm having a hard time believing that it can truly replace full, because AI specializes in specific areas. Accounting requires you to be able to think and operate, particularly in county government, where our services are very, very broad. We're saying it, your services are very, very broad. The product line is very, very broad. AI has not the ability to do multiple functions, if that makes sense. You can have an AI focused in on medical protein analysis, and so forth. But it can't switch from that and start doing the best practices on childcare. In county government, city government, and even in the private sector, who are doing nonprofit sectors, you're expected to think and operate with multiple clients and multiple people from multiple different backgrounds and work with their issues. I don't see how AI can replicate that.
Thank you, Nathan. You're bringing some confidence back in the accounting profession. I've got a next question here from Jason.
Yeah, thank you so much, panelists, for being a part of this. I'm Jason Lucero. I'm the accounting instructor and the advisor of the accounting club. I love that you brought up the notion of ethics. I teach business as well separately, and for those of you who have not taken a class on ethics, it really is just a matter of right versus wrong behavior. And this profession is absolutely grounded on the right side. It's a profession that demonstrates integrity because it has to remain objective. So I'm so glad you guys brought that up. But I think one of the things that I noticed as an instructor, especially at the community college level, and I went to Edmonds College myself, is that students really, you've emphasized the communication aspect of the profession, but students have an avoidance towards putting themselves out there from a communication standpoint. And that part of soft skill development is so important. So I was hoping maybe you could speak on just, yes, you need the line items on your resume that represent the credentials, the degree, the certificates, the training that you've received along the way to get your foot in the door within any professional environment. But separately, could you just speak a little bit in terms of soft skills and what they really matter, how much they matter within your profession, and why students maybe should put themselves out there? I know within our accounting club, there are students who are really willing to put themselves out there and take on tasks in order to develop their soft skills, but maybe you could just kind of speak on that to lend a little credentials towards what I try and present to students within the club and within my classes with regards to soft skills. I know that was long-winded.
I feel like, I had a really hard time talking to any manager before I actually found that advocacy I was talking about earlier. It does make a difference in the workplace who your manager is in order to communicate with them effectively. If you feel heard, if you feel seen, it is much easier to talk and develop those skills. I think depending on the accounting role as well, some accountants aren't on the phone a lot and they do have to actually talk and be vocal and actually be good at customer service. I think there's tons of classes, there's tons of YouTube videos, there's actually a lot of resources out in the world to help you develop those soft skills, in my personal opinion. But for me personally, the thing that developed mine the most was having a really good relationship with a boss who could see that I struggled, and she really did push me in a very uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable. No one wants to speak up because they might be wrong, or they might sound dumb, or they might sound like they don't know what they're talking about, or whatever. And for me, I fumbled my words so much, and I would turn bright red, and I hated talking at all. If I could have written it down, I would have just written it down. But it really did take one person for me to help me develop that, but there's just so many resources now. I mean, that was like, 8 years ago, 10 years ago. And I think now you guys have a lot at your fingertips to actually help you with that. Technology has made it, when we're in our phones, we don't have to talk. We don't have to develop those skills as much as we used to anymore. Like if someone had to break up with me, they had to come to my house. Or they had to get on the phone and call me. It was, and then we knew where each other lived, so we'd show up. It was a very person-to-person, face-to-face accountability that we just kind of are missing anymore. And while technology is awesome, it totally it's impacted our communication skills, it just has. And you can tell in the workplace when you're dealing with someone who has not developed their communication skills and would much rather just type up a message, because the minute you call them, they just one-word answers, or sure, okay, but then they have so much to say otherwise in an email, and sometimes, and this is why I showed up today, in person-to-person communication makes a huge difference. You see my body language, you see how I'm acting and talking to you. Not that Nathan and Gret, I'm sure they had commitments and couldn't make it, not that they're any less or I'm better. It's just that I tried really hard to make it in person for that reason, because when I'm meeting with someone and I'm trying to convey a message, it's a whole body experience for me. I use my hands, I use my eyes, I use the inflection of my voice, and you can see that I'm completely engaged. Those things are actually, they were developed over time, and they were developed by getting out there and getting uncomfortable. And if you have one person that advocates for you, that does help, but you are going to have experience with being uncomfortable. It just has to happen. So all growth is hard, all growth is uncomfortable. That's it. If you're trying to grow that thing is going to be uncomfortable until you're like, this is not a thing anymore. So hopefully that was long-winded also, sorry.
Love it, perfect.
Love those long-winded answers. Greg, what about you?
I'll reference communications. Always been key for me. And there's so many different forms of it. Even as an auditor, meeting with a taxpayer for the first time, walking into a large conference room, the CPA firm's there, the taxpayers, companies there, just saying, hey, how you doing? Not walking in with a strong jaw and being confrontational. Just easy going, asking some questions, make everyone a little more comfortable with the discussion and be a little more honest with each other. But even stuff like taking a power negotiations course, any sort of little trainings you can do are always helpful. I heard GFOA mentioned a little bit ago. There's WFOA. I've gone to a few of those, and they always have mixers. And it's good to just network. And I'm not the I don't have the most interesting job, but I can ask a question. And met so many people doing that, and just having a network of people that you've gotten to know, and you'll filter through. Those that relate more to you or have similar roles to you, and opportunities can open that way too. So that's just a few of my points for other things that you could do.
Nathan?
Soft skills and people skills are immeasurably important, particularly no matter which position you're in accounting role, if you're entry level or even CFO, and anything in between. Those skills are 100% critical. Areas and ways of developing it, in my experience, nonprofit, serving in nonprofits. My year in the Peace Corps, or the 14 months in the Peace Corps, was extremely critical in helping me develop soft skills. Learning how to interact in a culture, in a group of people that very radically different from you, and that you have to build trust and so forth with that's difficult. And serving in a nonprofit, nonprofits does help you do that. It helps you get you out of your accounting shell, get you required to talk to people that are very different from you, with different needs and different issues, and to be effective in that area. I think another area that always helps develops and really hones interpersonal skills in a business environment is if you ever are able to land a consulting / auditing type job, And there's a reason why auditors many times find themselves being hired by their clients. It's because over the years they've had to develop good, strong communication skills in the area of accounting and understand not just accounting, but all the internal controls in the environment that that client company operates in. That's an extremely valuable person if you can find them. So if you can ever land a consulting / auditing type position, those are always very advantageous in developing those soft skills. And then, like I said earlier, serving. Get yourself out of your accounting shell. Serve in nonprofits. And also make your environment, your community a better community at the same time.
Great. Does anyone have any other questions they'd like to ask?
Yeah, I have one more question. I probably don't even need a microphone because my voice carries, but yeah, I'd say going back to the pay thing, and I know students, especially at this point, I was a Borough Community College student. I remember the time, but I now am very happy with serving as an instructor of accounting, and the pay isn't fantastic, but I don't know that, I guess I would ask each of you, if your pay was doubled, would you be twice as happy necessarily? Do you think that's the case? Is pay necessarily linked with happiness? In your opinion, I know that's a subjective question, but at the same time, I was just hoping to get your perspectives.
I think my pay is tied to how I feel about myself in terms of what an organization sees my worth. That's what they're going to get out of me. So if I feel like I'm paid accordingly to what I feel is appropriate, and I'm usually way under, but if I feel like the organization has made me feel valuable in that way, yes. But if they paid me like double, I'd feel uncomfortable and I'd feel like I had to perform harder in some capacity. I think it would make me feel like I had like a red tick over my head. Like I would be the first to probably go because I'm so expensive. Because I would feel like I'm under the microscope. Like, okay, they've given me more money, so now they must want more out of me. And so I feel like that's my theory on like getting paid for what I feel is appropriate for my education and my experience. And that's kind of the commitment. It matches the commitment I'm giving to the organization. I think far too often you'll see all of it. You'll see people who are underpaid and completely happy with that. And you'll see people that are overpaid and they just want more. And there's just no middle ground. So it's an interesting, pay is so interesting now with the way that our economy is as well, that it's my children, so I have a college student as a child. She's terrified to go into the world because she's like, this is what it costs to live. How am I supposed to live? So there's this other piece too of like, I have to make sure that I can feed my kids and raise my kids appropriately and make sure that I can take care of myself. So does it measure my happiness? It relieves my stress sometimes to think that maybe my pay would make it so that I could actually, which it does now finally, match my lifestyle and me being able to care for my kids and me feeling happy and fulfilled. But if it was doubled, I would feel super, to answer your question, I would feel super comfortable.
Greg?
I don't think it would change my perspective, my happiness, but I'm certainly willing to try. If you want to do an experiment or something, I'm willing to try, and I'll write up results. Just kidding, of course. But pay, I feel like fairly compensated. What's really important for me is that I'm valued at work. I hear that a lot from my uppers, and I take pride in that. And I really enjoy the people that I work with. We have a great group, and we're expanding. And I will say that I'm impressed with, most everybody I meet at City of Bellevue that works there. I'm like, wow, this guy does this job for a city. Wow, that's glad we have him in that position. That's really important. So, but I don't think can't definitively say it would change my happiness, but I'm willing to try making double. You guys want to pass that on?
Nathan?
No, when I was in the Peace Corps, I made $160 a month and I lived in a glorified tool shed. Now, not so much, very different. And even if you doubled my salary, would I be happier or double the happiness? No. Would it get me closer to early retirement? Yes, that's true. But in terms, would it double your happiness? The answer is no. I think, like Greg said, whether you're valued in your workplace, that's what determines how happy you are. Are you valued, and are you respected, and are you needed? I have worked jobs where I was paid more and wasn't needed, and I tell you right now, that's not fun. And I've worked jobs where you're extremely needed and paid much less. And the jobs where you're needed is the ones that you are make you happy. The problem and the issue comes into is your pay. Is your pay commensurate with other people and used as a way of determining how needed are you? Which comes back to the very first few comments about women being paid less than men. It's not that women are paid less than men. It's when you compare women to the men and they're paid less and realize that, wait a minute, I know I'm just as valued. How come I'm not paid the same? That's where anger and resentment comes in, and as it should. Is there an inequality in pay between men and women? Absolutely. Is it wrong? Yep. Does it create a lot of negative feelings? And yep, it does. Should it change? Yes, it should.
Also, can I add one thing?
Yeah,
also,
go ahead.
isn't it? Working for a city of Bellevue, you can, any government worker, you can Google their salary. It's public information on how much they make. So going back to Amber's point, that might bring a whole level of pressure that on my work that I didn't consider before, but just wanted to mention that. That's a great point, Amber.
The thing in the private sector, you do see a lot more disparity between men and women just because of the fact that they can hide the salaries. In the public sector, you can't hide the salaries. It sticks out like a sore thumb and makes everybody look.
Yes, and to add to that, I think it's common to hear employers say that it's inappropriate to talk about your salaries. I want you all to talk about your salaries with each other. That's how you find the disparity. That's how you know who's getting paid. Especially if it's like the same person. You both have the same experience. You both have put in about the same effort. You both are, about the same age. If everything kind of lines up and they're paid significantly less or more than you, there should be a conversation happening with one of you guys, with your managers. And I think that adds to I don't think women pipe up as much as men, and I think that adds to it as well. Even if you probably came into the position with the same salary, he may or may not have negotiated a higher raise. He may or may not have negotiated a bonus. So there are factors that men advocate for themselves much better than women do that add to that disparity. So the old age of not talking about your salaries, you need to do that with your peers for sure. So that's my personal opinion.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely agree with that. Just a little tidbit. But I work at the YMCA with children, and there was an incident one time where we were on the playground watching the kids, and I was talking to my coworker, and she told me how much she was getting paid, and I was like, wait, that's different from me. We have the same amount of experience. And so that was a really big thing, because usually I'm not a very confrontational person. I'm usually very quiet, not quiet, but I kind of stay to myself, and I'm not willing to put myself out there. But I had advice from a director in another department, and I talked to my boss, and I was like, hey, this is what I was told about how much another coworker was getting paid for doing the same amount of work that I was doing. And we ended up finding out that it was an error in the system, and that the budgeting, they changed the budget number, and so they didn't take the time to change that number in my system, and I compensated. And so imagine if I would have just stood there, just took in my pay, came to work, and did my thing without realizing, hey, I'm getting paid less. And I think it's important, especially as women, to say, hey, this is what's going on, and listen to what I'm saying, because it's important. Because you'll see 9 times out of 10 that they're going to be like, oh, okay. this is reasonable, we'll adjust to it. So, and even if they don't, at least you put yourself out there because you need that skill for the rest of your life. So,
Can I piggyback off of that real quick?
Go ahead, Amber.
You raise a really good point in that I also think, I have a coworker who was, she was Black, and she said that I thought she was significantly underpaid for what she did. And she said, well, I can't say anything because then I'm the angry Black woman, and I have a. So I was like, having conversations with people who are non-white has been extremely helpful for me to make sure that as a person, if I have a position to be able to advocate for them as well, that if you see a disparity amongst anyone, that you're like, this person should be paid and you need to be their voice, that's when it's also extremely important. So I worked for a company where my subordinate, the woman who reported to me, was Asian. She would never advocate for herself, severely underpaid, hadn't had a raise in 5 years. So I had to go to management and I said, is there a reason that this woman has not gotten a raise? Because to me it just looks like she hasn't gotten a raise for very racist reasons. And they were like, well, and when I actually researched her employee file, I felt like the magnifying glass was on her so much more than her white counterparts. So I went to the entire head of the organization and I was like, this woman deserves a raise. If she deserves a raise, I walk up. And I was the division controller. I was in charge of the entire Washington division, so I knew that they needed to be. And they gave her like a 60% raise. And so then she, of course, was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Now the target's on my back, because she was actually very uncomfortable with the fact that I did that for her. And then after about a week of letting it settle, she started crying. She came out and was crying and she was like, I cannot believe that you did that for me. That was amazing. I would have never done that for myself. Thank you for at least opening the door for that conversation to happen. I feel more empowered. Like, you never know if, like you just said, if you say, don't be afraid to say the thing that's on your mind if it's pretty, especially if you have that inner voice, like trust your gut on an instinct, just because if you don't say something, that woman probably would have gone another 2 years, 3 years without ever receiving the raise. So you make an excellent point, and I feel like I've said it 1,000 times to advocate for yourself, but just keep doing that.
Right, I agree. Yeah, and especially in like, even if you work like a very regular average job, you're a waitress or something like that, you need to advocate for yourself. So with that being said, I wanted to thank you for coming out here. Thank you for the panelists for sharing with us your roles in government and nonprofit organizations and giving us a better understanding of their accounting practices, and we appreciate all of you guys for coming out here today. Thank you so much.